Okay, we'll wait just a moment here while folks log on and we get the live stream up and running.
Sounds good.
We get the live stream up and running.
Sounds good.
Okay, it looks like we are good to go. Hello, everyone, and we want to welcome you to our event this evening. My name is Joel Gardner, and I am a volunteer with the Salt Lake County GOP, serving as the facilitator for tonight's town hall with some of our candidates in the county. We're excited to have Melanie Monestere, candidate for Utah State School Board District 6, here with us. I want to welcome everyone joining virtually on Facebook and on YouTube, and would encourage you to submit your questions throughout the event there in the comments so that we can address those for each of the candidates. I also want to note that our event tonight is being sponsored and is made possible by your donations. So we thank you for your support, and if you are able to give more to make more of these types of events possible, we encourage you to do that at SLCoGOP.com. So I want to get started by asking Melanie to just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and why you decided to run for school board. And just quickly, if you could, before that, tell us what District 6 covers so that we know kind of what region you would be representing.
Sure. Hi, Joel. Thank you for being our interviewer tonight. And I also want to thank everyone who's watching. It's a lot of work to be a truly informed voter, and it's events like this that really help voters to know what's going on in these races. And I appreciate everyone who is watching. My district is District 6 of the state school board, and the state school board is it has 15 members, and there are 15 geographic districts in Utah. My district happens to be the eastern part of Salt Lake City, so it covers U of Utah, Avenues, Emigration Canyon, Park City, and then back over to Solitude and Brighton, Holiday, Mill Creek, Mount Olympus, and Sugar House. So it's a very large district. I have 110,000 voters in my district. And to tell you a little bit about myself, I grew up in the Midwest. My father had grown up on a farm. He was the seventh of 9 children. His grandparents were immigrants. And my parents started out, my father was a carpenter, my mother a homemaker. And my mother later decided to go to college and became the first in our family to earn a college degree. And, you know, it was really her education that made a huge difference for us. And I went on to attend college and graduate school, and I got my law degree. There were so many teachers along the way who made the difference for me in my life, and they believed in me, and they really pursued excellence in teaching and in the classroom. You know, I remember having teachers coming in, you know, every day, having, you know, watched everything in the news related to their subject, and coming in every day with all kinds of interesting developments and stories, and really making it exciting to learn. And that made all the difference in my life. And as a lawyer, I did probate and estate work. I helped families to plan for surviving spouses, grandchildren, and doing charitable giving in the community. And really help them with their legacies and, you know, preservation of family assets to pass on to the next generation and to our charities. So I'm always so grateful for the opportunities I had in my law practice. It was wonderful to be able to help families and to be able to put their minds at ease and, you know, get things taken care of for them. So I was really thankful for that. After my second child was born, I decided to become a full-time parent and to be at home. I got very active in my children's preschool, elementary school, and, you know, became a classroom volunteer and then a parent board member over the years, and really wanted to be a part of what they were experiencing and what was going on at our school. So I've been very active in the school and been there with the kids and really on the front lines with everything that's happening in our schools. So I'm not a detached or abstract board member. I'm someone who is right in there with the parents, teachers, and the kids. And that's really important to me. When we look at what's happening in our schools, we're really forming the next generation of our community. And there's nothing that's more important than that in terms of what's going to happen, what's going to be here, what's our community going to be in 20 years. And that's why I'm running.
Thank you so much for that. I'm interested in if you could just tell us a little bit more about what the school board does and what are some of the responsibilities that you would have as a member of the state school board.
Sure. So the state school board, probably the biggest piece of what they do is the budget for our schools. And this is a very large budget for the schools statewide. They also allocate a good share of the funds in terms of what things will be spent for. Much of it is given to local districts, and the local districts can make a lot of decisions and choices with the money. But that is a very significant component of what the state school board does. They additionally, they recommend curriculum. They set a lot of school policies. They take laws that have been passed by the legislature and implement those in the schools. There are several, many examples of this. Recently, we had HB374, which is the school book law, and the legislature passed it and, instructed the state school board to, handle implementation. And part of that was that the board recently passed a model policy or an example policy that a school district can choose to either implement or, come up with their own policy. So there are circumstances like that where the state school board will provide a suggestion or direction, and then the local district is going to make the ultimate choice and decision. Another example is with curriculum, that the state school board may recommend curriculum, but not ultimately require any particular, because that is at the discretion of our local boards to choose curriculum for the local community. So, one thing that's really important in education is that we have local control. And we, even with the state school board, we do try to make sure that our local districts have a lot of decision-making power. And that gives parents more authority in terms of, being involved in decisions that are made for their school.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And I think this role is one that's maybe underappreciated, but it sounds like, at least for the students in our state, your role is really significant in representing the values and the interests of our parents. I want to ask if you could tell us a little bit about the ways that you would work to improve academics in the state. We have less than half of our high school graduates at grade level proficiency in math and reading and science. And what could we do to support and improve our students' learning?
So, if we take a look at our spending nationally, we are ranked last. We are 50th out of 50 states. And that makes us a little concerned. But what actually happens in terms of the academic results we get is we're doing significantly better academically, but we're still having less than half of high school graduates at grade level in math, reading, and science. So there's definitely room for improvement. In my district at East High School, we have only 31% of kids graduating at grade level in English. It's 27% for science, and it's 20% for math in terms of being at grade level. So we also have elementary schools in Salt Lake District where less than 1/4 of kids are at grade level. So we have a lot of room for improvement in terms of our children really learning and absorbing the material. And when we look at these test scores, people think COVID, they think, oh, scores went down because of COVID and that's the reason. But the truth is actually that the scores were going down years before COVID happened, unfortunately, and they have just continued to decline year after year. So, we have a lot of room for improvement. And one thing that's happened, with education, there tend to be trends. And every year there's the flavor, there's the new hot trend and the new curriculum, and there's a tendency to want to jump on that bandwagon. And so we've put in a lot of programs over the years, and we seem to keep piling more things on, yet our results keep getting worse. And I think that we ought to take a step back and take a fresh look at everything that we're doing, and that we can get a renewed focus on academic excellence. Let's focus on our math, reading, science, and computers. And let's make sure that our kids are getting the best we can do for them in those areas before we start layering on all these other things that have come into the classroom. So I think there's a lot of room for academic excellence to be a renewed focus. And, another thing that's happened in a lot of our schools is that class sizes have become very high. And part of the reason is because we have a teacher shortage, and that is true nationwide, but it's also true here in our state. So I think we want to take a look at why teachers are leaving. Part of the problem is half the teachers leave in the first 5 years out of college, and they don't return to teaching. And so part of the problem is, let's make teaching a more attractive profession for them. Let's make conditions better. A lot of added duties have been piled on teachers over the years, and we ought to take a look at paring some of that back and getting back to the academic excellence and the joy of teaching, which is teaching subject material that they intended to do. Some of the things that have come in have even been like, giving therapy services to kids. And that is something that our teachers are not trained to do. So some of these things ought to be really relooked at. We ought to look at our teacher compensation. How can we make teaching more attractive? When our teachers are in college and there are all these other great careers that we're competing with to attract people to teaching. And I think that, our compensation has to be competitive if we want to get the best, we want to get great people in our teaching positions. So, I think there's a lot we can do to improve our teacher retention and, get better results for our kids.
Yeah, I definitely have experienced that. Or when talking with folks that I know that have gone into teaching, they do it because they love kids and they really want to be there for them, and they're willing to, forego other career tracks. But ultimately, many of them burn out after a few years. So yeah, it's great that you're focusing on how do we make sure that we allow them to do what they do best, which is to teach and be in the classroom. So I think that's a really, really valuable approach to take. I want to ask about students that don't end up going to college and what we're doing for them. A study has shown that about 1 in 3 Utah high school students don't ultimately end up in college. And what might be your approach to make sure that they feel supported? I know that there's this focus on, everyone needs to go to college. And I wonder, if that might leave these students underserved, and what you might do to actually make sure that they're not left behind.
I've had so many parents tell me that their high school has gotten rid of vocational programs, and some high schools still have the vocational programs, but many of our schools have taken those out. And I've talked with school principals to say, why have these programs been removed? And the answers that I get are number one, staffing, that we've had regulations that require everyone to basically, have a teaching certificate, a degree in teaching. And oftentimes the best people to teach our trades and vocational classes are tradespeople. And, we may get retired tradespeople who would like to come in and help out our high schools and teach our kids. And if they don't have a teaching certificate, we can't hire that person. So I think there are things we can do to make the getting teachers for the trades more attractive and more, more people available who would qualify. I think another issue has definitely been the cost of equipment and keeping our schools current on equipment. And that's been an issue just in terms of funding that, equipment is changing rapidly in many of these areas. And that's a funding issue that we would need our legislature to be willing to fund. So I think there are a few things we can do to support our kids going into the trades. Tradespeople, our electricians, our plumbers, they play a huge role and a very important role in our community. And we definitely want to support kids who are not college bound and to, really nurture their career path and give them opportunities. Another program that has been effective in a few of our schools and could be expanded has been to partner with local technical colleges so that high school students can go into the technical college and take those courses as part of their high school credit. And I think that's a great alternative in terms of, addressing, rather than the school replicating what's already being done at the technical college.
Yeah, those are some really great approaches, I think. And I think even for those students who do ultimately go to college, those classes around vocational training and shop classes and auto mechanics, I think those are valuable for students across the board. I know I ultimately did go to college, but I still really benefit from those courses. So I want to ask you just to as we come to the actually before we close, I think let me check and see if we have any questions coming through on the Facebook page here or the YouTube. Let's see. Okay, I'm not seeing any comments come through here. Let me pull these up. I think we haven't gotten any questions so far. So I guess if you could just share a little bit, kind of summarize again, what you're hoping to do. And if you could just talk a little bit about where people can find out more information and how people can support your campaign.
Sure. People can go to my website. It's melanie4utah.com. That's the word FOR, not the number. And they can find links there to support my campaign. And I would appreciate that. We're really trying to get the word out. I think sometimes in Salt Lake County, there's a perception that, that maybe it's kind of a challenge or a little bit of an uphill climb for Republican candidates. And I just want to say that, looking at all the voter data, and Joel, you may have looked at this too, it's very, very achievable for for Republican candidates to win these races. And we need your support. We need you to help us get the word out and make sure those ballots get cast. That's what we need. I think that, we can do so much for our kids and really take a fresh look at a lot of things. And another comment I'd like to mention that parents raise with me is, the role of our activities for kids in our schools. When we look at a high school student, what gets that student out of bed in the morning to get to school? It probably isn't being excited about their math class. It's probably, maybe sports. It might be theater, music, band, might be debate class or art. And those are the programs that not only get kids excited about being a part of the school community, but also help them form friendships, across, socioeconomic, ethnic, gender, different, divisions, because the kids that are with them in their sport, on their football team or, on their swim team or in their choir, those are their friends. And I think that there's so much that we can do to support those programs. And I think in some schools they have been, funding has been reduced, or some of the programs like music and art may have been even eliminated in some cases. And, I just want to say those programs really help our kids to have, much better emotional well-being. There's a strong correlation between kids who are involved and, how well they're doing performing academically, and also, emotional health. And that our kids who are involved in the school community, we don't tend to see the problems with substance abuse, with depression, and a whole host of things when kids get involved in the community. And, we ought to take a look at really supporting, making those programs great for our kids. and really supporting them in that. And I think that we can improve our kids, our communities, our emotional health, just by really making those experiences great experiences at school. So thanks again, Joel, for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. What I really want to do as a board member is, to promote policies that will put our kids first, their academic success, their emotional well-being. I want to take a fresh look at what we're doing in our schools. And I have children in school. I'm right in the middle of this with all the parents. And I'm excited about the opportunity to take things in a new direction. So I'm Melanie Monestere. I'm a candidate for the State School Board District 6, and I respectfully ask for your vote.
Well, thanks, Melanie, and thanks for being willing to answer the call to run for this really critical position at this time in Utah's history. So we want to thank you, and we encourage those who are interested in supporting you or learning more to go to your website to find out more information.
Thanks, Joel.
Okay, thanks so much. We'll wait just a moment while our next candidate jumps on, and we'll be right back in just a moment. Okay, it looks like we're about ready to start with our second candidate of the evening. Let's get him welcomed here into the Zoom. Hi, Jay, can you hear me all right? Let's see, I think you're on mute there. There we go. I think we can hear you.
All right, great. How are you doing?
Doing very well. Thanks for joining us tonight. For those of you who might just be joining us, we're here with our second candidate for tonight's Town Hall Thursday. My name is Joel Gardner. I'm a volunteer with the Salt Lake County GOP. I'm helping to run this event tonight. We're excited to have Jay Cobb, the candidate for Utah House District 48, with us here tonight. Again, want to remind everyone that joining virtually on Facebook and YouTube to add your comments, your questions there, so the candidates can respond. It looks like we may have missed one or two of them from Melanie, so we'll have her go in and respond online to those. But we'll make sure to figure out how to get those for Jay. So if you have comments or questions, feel free to add those. And again, just want to reiterate that we're able to do these events because of generous support from our donors. So if you'd like to make a contribution, you can go to SLCoGOP.com to support events like these. And Jay, wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about your background and your experience and what has made you a qualified candidate for this position, and what made you decide to run?
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, thank you, Joel, for hosting this. It's always a pleasure to talk about the issues of the day and to talk about what's going on in the state. And I think there's some really important issues out there. So just by way of background, I am running for the Utah House of Representatives in District 48. And for those who may not know, District 48 is actually a brand new district. The number is not new, but they created a new district. The state legislature created a new district in the redistricting process. And so, like I said, this is a brand new district. It covers parts of Riverton, parts of Harriman, and parts of South Jordan, mostly the Founders Park part of Daybreak and Highland Park part of Daybreak. And so that's the district. It was kind of carved up from the districts around it. And so it's exciting to be in a new district. There's no incumbent in this district. So this is kind of a new race with some fresh faces in the race. So, and to tell you a little about me and why I'm running, first of all, I live in South Jordan. I live in Founders Park part of Daybreak. I've been there for about 15 years. I'm married and have 4 children, all of which have gone to, well, it's kind of interesting. I have a daughter who went to Riverton High School, a son who went to Harriman High School, another son in Hillcrest High School right now, and I have a daughter at North Star Academy at a charter school. So we kind of spread out overall a bunch of different schools in the area. So I'm actually originally from Philadelphia. That's where I was born and raised, actually right next to Valley Forge Park. I used to ride my bike there when I was a kid. And I love growing up there. I got to know our history, got to know about the Declaration of Independence, the Founding Fathers, and come to love our Founding Fathers and what they did and what they created in this country that we have. A lot of respect for them. But I've been in Utah. I first came here in 1989. And so I've been here for quite a long time. My educational background, I went to Brigham Young University and got an economics degree. That's my undergraduate degree. I went to law school back in Washington, D.C. at the George Washington University, and started practicing law. And so I started practicing first here in Salt Lake at a local firm, mostly in litigation. But then I actually went back to DC and worked for a large international law firm there. And also, and importantly, in terms of policy in this race, is I actually first kind of cut my teeth in public policy work back in DC when I was legislative counsel to a United States Senator from Utah. So I actually spent some time on Capitol Hill, where my job was to build coalitions, to help draft legislation, to help work it through the process. And that's really where I kind of fell in love with public policy work. After being in DC for a few years, I actually decided to take a little break from law and go back to school. And I went back to Brigham Young University to get an MBA, a Master's in Business Administration. So we did that. And then after I completed that, I've been in-house counsel for a bunch of companies since then. And so right now, I am a practicing attorney. I'm in-house counsel for a consumer packaged goods company in the direct selling space. I do a lot of work for them in a variety of issues. I head up their international regulatory affairs department and handle everything from advertising law to employment law to a little bit of corporate law, and just kind of run the gambit on that. And I like to tell people about that because I think it's important for people to know that in the 20 plus years I've been practicing law in the workforce, I've had a really broad base of experience. I've dealt with a lot of different issues. And one of the things I think sets me apart from my opponent is that I'm the type of person who really tries to get in the weeds, really tries to understand. And having such a breadth of experience, I've had a little bit of experience in a lot of things. And I think it's allowed me, and I have a skill set and such that I can really get to root causes of problems and really try to address problems and focus on how we actually fix things and how we be effective and get things done. I also tell people that in all my positions, ever since I left DC, I've always had a little aspect of public policy work, whether it be working with state legislatures to get laws passed, whether it be working at the federal level to block bad laws or to help pass good laws. I've always had that aspect. And so my love for public policy has kind of continued. I've been fortunate enough to do a lot of that in my profession. I want to bring that skill set to the Utah State Legislature. And so that's a little bit about me and about my background. You asked a specific question, that was, why am I running? Right. And that's probably the most common question I get when I'm out knocking on doors and talking to people. And I always like to tell a little story about why I'm running. You know, I used to be, probably like a lot of people who are listening, or a lot of people out there, I used to be the guy on the couch who would hear the news and be like, what is going on with this country? What these politicians, how in the world, what are they doing? They're not getting this right. And I was kind of the griper and complainer. And I remember one time I was talking to my colleague and, complaining about things that were going on in the political world. I said, how in the world do some of these people get elected? And I said that, and my colleague turned to me and said, because they run. And it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. And I thought, you know what? I mean, as simple as that sounds, he's absolutely right. And that's when I thought, you know what? If I want to have a better legislature or better public policy making, I should jump in, because it's the people who run. And so, part of the reason I'm jumping in this race is because I think it's important. I care about the issues. I care about the state. I care about where I live in my communities. And I think we have some problems we need to solve. And I don't want to be the guy on the couch just complaining. I thought, I have a skill set. I have, I think, some expertise that I can bring to bear. And so I'm going to run. I'm going to do that. And now being in the campaign, I can understand why not everyone runs, right?
Yeah.
But that moment for me was kind of an eye opener, saying, you know what, it's time for me to get off the couch, and it's time for me to really see if I can make a difference, if the people will have me, if I can get elected, and I think I can do a lot of good, and I really do care about what happens at the state legislature, what happens with our public policy. And I want to see good things. And so that's why I'm running.
Great. Yeah, well, I've heard it said that you can either wring your hands or you can roll up your sleeves, but you can't do both. And so I'm grateful that there is someone like you with experience both on the private side and the public side that's willing to step up and take on the challenge of running and putting together a campaign and really being willing to be a public servant. So I want to start by asking you just a little bit about taxes and inflation and just some of the financial burdens that Utah families are currently experiencing. A recent study by the Hinckley Institute of Politics showed that among all of the issues that are facing Utah's families, inflation was actually the #1 issue in the last year. So I want to just hear your reaction to that, and if you could talk about what you as a member of the state legislature could do to address inflation.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you asked that question, because in my mind, that is the issue of the moment. And I'm actually kind of surprised more candidates aren't talking about this because inflation is hitting people hard. I think it really is. Every night I go out and campaign. Most of the nights I'm out knocking doors. And this is the #1 issue I'm hearing. That, and also, I'm going to hold this up. We all got, I don't know if you can see this,
Yep.
our property tax notices, right? I mean, if I think I'm not the only one who's a little shocked about the increases that are going on property taxes, right? I know mine is going up well over the rate of inflation. I think my school district is at 23% lease. And the way it's calculated, your rate can be different for everybody, right? But I think across the board, everyone was a little sticker shock on that. So these are big issues, and I wish other candidates were talking about this. But so one of the things I tell people when I go out is one of my main focus and one of my key planks on my platform is about lowering taxes. Utah, we're fortunate. We have low unemployment. We have a great economy, and we're actually going to have some surpluses. And so my philosophy, I'm a conservative and I don't shy away from that, but my philosophy is that we should do all we can to not unnecessarily grow government. And one of the biggest temptations and fears that I have is that if there's a surplus, that there's a temptation to spend. And so I want to be one of the vanguards up there that says, hey, if we've over collected in taxes, first of all, it's not the government's money, it's our money. It should be given back to them, and not just given back a portion, and we'll keep more so we can grow. But I do think we are in a position where we absolutely can lower our taxes. And for the state legislature, their primary levers or tools are income tax and sales tax. Right? That's really what they control. they do have, I think, one line item on your property tax bills, right? But I also think in talking with people, another frustration I'm hearing about taxes in general, and then specifically property tax, is some of the processes that are going on. I mean, we have truth in taxation, we have these notices, but a lot of people go to these truth in taxation hearings and overwhelmingly, do not support the tax increase. But then the decision was kind of pre-made, right? And so I'm open to looking at ways the state legislature can maybe improve that process so that the citizens can actually have more influence on the actual decision making, not just kind of an after the fact hearing when they can come and vent, but not really have that much of an impact. And so, those are some of the things I want to do. And I think, as we give, or I should say, let people keep their own money, I think that can help at least combat inflation. It's not going to lower inflation per se. Inflation is a complicated matter. You got things from supply chain issues, to the Federal Reserve raising rate and interest rates, and there's a lot that goes into that. But at least some of the impact, I think, can be assisted or blunted or muted by what the state legislature can do in taxes and their tax policy. So I'm anxious. Like I said, I would love to go out there and fight for lower taxes. I would love to go out there and be a strong advocate for Utah families who are getting hurt right now by this inflation. That's what I would love to do.
Yeah, I think that could be a really valuable approach, just allowing families to keep a greater percentage of their own money to try to combat the inflation that we're experiencing. I'm wondering if, on a related note, wondering what you as a member of our state legislature could do to protect families, or if there's any specific bills that you have supported in the past or that you would support to do that.
So I think what might be most helpful for people to realize is I like, when I'm out in the campaign trail, I like to kind of explain how I think and how I approach problems. Because people understand my values, my principles and philosophies, I think then they're applied to a lot of situations, and rather than just say this bill or that bill. So let me answer your question by talking a little bit about how I approach that, because I do support families, right? I think one of my concerns and fears is that sometimes government, in their effort to help people or solve problems, are actually doing things that are counterproductive and destroy families. And what I mean by that is I look at situations where we have problems, say, in the community, or we have issues that we solve, and we all run to the state government or the federal government and say, help, help, help. Whereas a lot of times I think with proper leadership, we can have community solutions that we can rally around. I'll give you a prime example, and this is just a little example. We had some neighbors and some friends. We were having some serious health problems, right? And as I talked to my wife, and this is several years ago, and we said, hey, you know what? We love our neighbors. We want to help them. Maybe we should get together and raise some money and see if we could help offset some of their medical expenses. But when we went and actually talked to them, their answer was, don't worry about it. Government's paying for everything. I don't know if it was Medicaid, Medicare, or whatever, but you don't have to worry about anything. And to me, that was kind of a shame, because I thought, here we were ready to help. This is something our neighborhood could have rallied around and our community could have rallied around. But for the intervention of the government, which I think had good intentions, it kind of took that incentive away, right? And so I learned a great lesson then in that experience, in that I think communities will step up and we can help build communities and family. And with strong communities, I think comes strong families as well. Strong families actually build strong communities, right? And I worry that when the government is looked to as a solution for everything, it actually can destroy some of those things. And so I think as a state legislator, there's two things I would do, right? One is I'd be on guard to make sure we're not increasing the government. I'd actually kind of want to shrink the government of that. And two is I think the legislature and legislators have a unique position. They have what they call a bully pulpit, right? The ability to bring people together. And I think leadership can be demonstrated in that way to help build communities. There's nothing that says a legislator can't call on, city leaders or nonprofit or other religious institutions or whatever, and build some community to help solve some of our really thorny problems that need to be solved. And at the same time, supporting families, right? I think when families become engaged in their community, I think they can grow stronger. I think some of the policies that might tear away at families when we look to government can be eliminated. And so, when we talk about families and community, I kind of put those together. And I think there's so much that with proper leadership, we can address a whole host of problems. I'm a big believer in local control and bringing things down on the community level. And so from a approach or perspective, that's what I would do. Now, specific bills, one thing you'll find about me too is I want to read bills and I want to understand bills before I opine on bills, because I always look for unintended consequences. I was trained to actually read legislation and try to come up with the unintended consequences. And so, certainly if there's bills that on its face, are tearing families apart or taking away parental rights or trying to undermine what parents are trying to do with their kids and with their families, those I'm probably not going to be in favor, and we'll take a hard look at those. So that's kind of my approach of how I will approach some of those things.
Yeah, I think that's such a good reason to be for small government, that we don't always understand what the unintended consequences of things are going to be, and that's why it's so valuable that we don't assume that government knows how to approach everything or knows how to solve all these problems. But if we can rely on local communities and the private sector to solve many of these problems, that ends up hopefully avoiding some of these negative unintended consequences of government intervention.
Absolutely, and they have to be given the opportunity, one, and then they have to have the right leadership. And again, I think there's a huge opportunity missed by state legislatures who are not pulling the stakeholders together, calling those meetings, trying to build those coalitions to address some of these problems.
Yeah, absolutely. Want to remind everyone who's listening in and watching online to submit your questions. We've got a couple more questions for Jay here, and then we'll turn to some Q&A. So put your questions in the chat there, and we'll address some of those. I want to talk to you about growth in Utah. As we all know, we've all experienced it. Growth is a big issue here in Utah, and that's really great for economic reasons, for the economic growth of the Salt Lake Valley, especially. It's also causing some issues, and I'm wondering what you see as some of the greatest issues there, and what you think the role of the state government is in trying to address some of those.
Absolutely, thank you for that question. Yeah, so it's interesting. In District 48, we are in the southwest part of Salt Lake Valley, right? That part of the valley is probably experiencing more growth than probably just about anywhere in the state. I mean, the state's growing, don't get me wrong, but there is tremendous growth. In fact, I've lived in the district for over 15 years. When I moved in, Harriman High School hadn't been built yet, right? For those who know the area, Daybreak Lake hadn't even been created yet, and anyone who's lived in the district for as long as I have, or even longer, have just seen tremendous growth. And there's been some controversy, some issues. There's a whole sentiment about high density housing, right? And is it the right thing to do? And affordable housing, these are some key issues. So my approach to this is, one is, first of all, I do think a lot of the growth and the way it's managed is up to counties and cities. They control zoning and they control development and things like that. But that doesn't mean there's not an interest in the state legislature, right? And I think when you look at the state legislature, you got to think about what tools do they have, right? How can they affect a development and growth? And I think one of the major tools they have is transportation and infrastructure and roads, right? And one thing I think that the District 48 and the southwest part of the valley essentially is some more infrastructure, especially, we've talked forever about east-west connectors or whatever, but as a state legislator, in conjunction with others in the part of the valley, I think one thing we can really do is prioritize the funding for that part of the valley, right? There's priorities all over the state, right? And legislatures kind of fight for priority there, right? And so the fact you can influence that, I think bringing some of the money that is going to be spent anyway, so this is not new money, right? I'm not going to raise taxes for this, but prioritizing this area of the valley. I think Salt Lake County for a while has not had a strong enough a voice in doing that. And so I would add my voice to the others and be a forceful advocate, I think, in doing that. And in doing that, though, then you have a lever tool to help manage growth, right? To make sure it's done properly. You know, and again, one of the most obvious byproducts of growth, if it's not done right, is traffic and congestion. And if you've gone and driven in rush hour in District 48, you're going to see it. So I think we can address that right away. The other thing is actually working with cities and counties to actually have coordinated efforts between the state and city on growth and manage growth. But to be honest, a lot of that is left to cities and counties. You know, they control a lot of that, but we certainly can manage that a little bit better with better coordination and with the levers that the state legislature does have in terms of impacting that growth.
Yeah, it sounds like developing that partnership is really critical for handling things both at the local and the state level.
Yep.
Well, great. I want to ask you, you've talked a few times and we've talked about small government and that's kind of one of the pillars of your campaign. I want to know if there are some recent examples of government overreach that you've observed and how you might have approached the situation differently. You know, if as a state legislator, how you would recommend that we approach that a little bit differently in a way that preserved this value of small government.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I want to say, you know, I think there are some good things going on in Utah, right? I think my approach is first to build on the good things, right? And then try to help with things that aren't being addressed. And I always think, look, anyone who says there's not waste, fraud, and abuse in government, I don't think has been in reality. Now, we try to limit that. We absolutely do. And we try to tamp that down, but that's always an issue. But I look to kind of some initiatives that are going on. I mean, you know, my wife and I, a few years ago, started our own small business, right? And so I've been through the process of like to start a business and all the hoops you have to jump through, and all the different registrations and all the different things like that. And I also hear about, you know, all the licensing that's required. And I know, for example, the Department of Commerce right now is doing a complete review of, you know, what licenses are really necessary and how do we streamline that. I think those are great efforts. I think that's an example of something where we can shrink government. You know, do we really need, you know, so many hours of study for certain occupations? And if so, or reciprocity with other things. So I think there's a lot we can do. My goal in looking at that, first of all, is stop any growth of government, right? I think that's the first thing. And then start taking kind of line by line these reviews to see, you know, what can we do? My expertise and where I really focus is more on the financial side and the practical things, kind of more on the business side and how we can streamline that. I would love to streamline. I mean, Utah's been known to be a great state to start a business in, right? But I think there's even rooms to do that. I remember when we started our business, you know, all the different departments, all the different agents we had to go to, and you know, if you forget one thing, then, you know, you got to go back and fix everything. And certainly we can streamline some of that. But, you know, if there's one thing, if you're asking, is there one thing that you're just dying to tackle? I think that I would be a little short-sighted to say, yeah, there's just one thing. I think we got to look at everything. Right? We got to look at it all. I don't want to leave anything out. And so that's the way I would approach it. But certainly things like licensing and things that I think that are easy to look at, those should be done, you know, in the right way. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes those who lobby for these really stringent licensure requirements are maybe the existing players that are trying to have more barriers to entry to these new entrants. Or
well, and look, I'll admit, look, I'm part of the Utah bar, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of a monopoly, quasi monopoly there, right? I mean, there's reasons they have that, but I do think, you know, that in terms of, that's just one aspect, but there's a lot of things we can look of how we keep government small or reduce it. And I honestly, a lot of the small government will be stopping kind of inertia and growth, almost kind of attrition. And that's, I think, how we keep government small. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And that there are definitely those areas in which more stringent licensure is important. Yeah. I know of a case, you know, there were a woman that braided hair was told she needed thousands of hours of hours time logged to be able to do that, and so some things end up seeming a little excessive.
Yeah. One thing I also tell people is like, look, I'm not arrogant to think I know everything, right? So I love going out, and I've been doing this in my campaign, just talking to people and hearing their experiences, because that's where we hear about some of the problems that need to be fixed. So, one thing I'd also say is if people have ideas, I would love to hear them, right? I would love to see where have they heard in their own lives government overreach, right? Where have they seen that? Where they think government can be solved? Because, I'm a big believer that good ideas come from all over the place, and that, Republicans don't have a monopoly on good ideas in terms of shrinking government, and other parties can contribute, and we can all find solutions that way. So.
Yeah, I think that's such a valuable perspective, looking more at the ideas than the party or whatever groups.
So I guess my kind of call to anyone who's listening to this or might listen to future, reach out to me and let me know what you're seeing. I would love to tackle some of those issues that you think are really important.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And just wanted to give you a few moments just as we come to the end of our time here to give somewhat of a closing statement and let's folks know where they can learn more about you and how they can support your campaign.
Awesome, thank you. Yes. So first of all, you can learn more about me. I have a website. It's Cobb for Utah.com. My email's there. It's jcobb@cobb4utah. And I'd love to hear from you. But as kind of closing, one thing I hope to leave with people, and I hope they will realize as I'm out campaigning, talking to people, that I'm committed. I think I can do a good job, and I can represent people well. And make no mistake about it, I'm a conservative, and I'm not ashamed of that. And I tell people I have conservative values and conservative principles. You see it in my platform. About lower taxes, small government, strong communities, improving education. But I think one thing that sets me apart, besides my experience, is that I do believe it's important to work with people. And we see a lot of divisiveness right now in our country, right? And we see a lot of division, which I think is unnecessary, right? I think we kind of force that sometimes. So I tell everyone, I have my principles and my values, but I want to hear from everyone. And I think we can, when we talk and when we actually listen, we can actually have an impact in a positive way that doesn't have to be mean-spirited. And look, I'm not going to be the guy who calls the other people in the other party, evil or the devil or whatever, right? But I am going to fight and advocate for conservative principles, and I'm going to work hard. And I think there's a lot we can do. And I think with the support, if I'm elected, I hope to represent the residents of District 48 and be a strong advocate, not just for the needs of District 48, but also for the state. So that's a little bit about me.
Well, great. I want to thank you for being here tonight and for all you're doing. And would encourage those who are listening to go to your website and see how they can get involved.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Yep. Thanks, Jay.
Okay. All right. Bye.
All right. And thanks to those who are still with us here. We've got one more candidate of the evening, Danielle, who's running for district attorney. So we'll have her join in just a moment. Okay, and as Danielle joins, I just want to remind everyone that we are taking questions live. So if you'd like to submit your questions, go ahead and do that. Again, my name is Joel Gardner, and I'm a volunteer with the Salt Lake County GOP, facilitating tonight. And Danielle, I think, can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, Perfect. Yeah, we're excited to have Danielle on here tonight, candidate for Salt Lake County District Attorney. Want to welcome everyone joining virtually via Facebook and YouTube, and again, encourage you to submit your questions there. And again, just wanted to remind everyone that this event is made possible by your generous support. So if you are willing and able, we'd love to have your donations through Salt Lake SLCoGOP.com. You can make a donation to help us put on more of these types of events. Well, thanks for being here, Danielle. We're excited to have you. And just to begin, I was hoping you could share a little bit about your background and what made you decide to run for district attorney for Salt Lake County.
Well, wonderful. And thank you for having me. I also see that you are decorated in the Ute gear.
You got it.
We'll go ahead and start there. So I graduated from the University of Utah with my law degree in 2019. I've been a litigator ever since. I'm licensed here and in Arizona. And the reason that I decided to run is that I thought, you know what, anyone could do a better job than what Sim Gill is doing, but especially me, because I have the right vision, I have the right skills. And more than that, I have a passion for the work I'm doing. I had 2 friends who were violently sexually assaulted. We had evidence enough to bring charges, and the DA's office said that there wasn't sufficient evidence to bring charges, which I knew was not the case. And so I helped to pass a law in 2018 that would allow the AG to take some of these sexual assault cases that were being declined by the DA's office. And that passed, and it was wonderful. But there's a lot of work to do. And I think it's a shame that the legislature is having to legislate the work that the DA should be doing on their own. And so that's why I'm running.
Wow. Well, thank you. And I, just as I've interacted with you and heard you speak, I think the passion comes through that comes from this personal experience of feeling like there could be so much more done to promote justice in the county. So I really appreciate that passion and vision that you bring. I want to start with a case that I think will be really resonant to many residents of Salt Lake County. As you mentioned, both you and I are graduates of the University of Utah, and it was about 1 year ago that we were all really shocked to hear of the death of one of the University of Utah football players, Aaron Lowe. And if you could just tell us a little bit about this case and what you think happened and how you as a district attorney could really prevent something like this from happening again.
Absolutely. So with the Aaron Lowe case, it's interesting. Book or Buck, depending on how you want to pronounce his name, I don't particularly care because in my mind, he's just a murderer. So, but Book, he is an immigrant, and he started off his criminal career with just basic theft. And then basic theft graduated to him going in, breaking and entering, and trying to steal things from people. That graduated to him actually breaking into a home and trying to kill a dog in the process of stealing from someone. All of these cases were brought forward and reported. And this is just on the cases that I can see, right? These cases were actually charged. Something happened. I'm sure that there were more run-ins with the law that we can't see. But regardless, he had this long history of crime that slowly was escalating. And the DA continued to dismiss charges against him. And there were delays and delays and delays in charging decisions, in actually bringing the case to trial in some of these circumstances. And about a year prior to him shooting, Aaron Lowe, he had actually conducted an armed robbery against a man and his daughter. He set them up. He said, hey, he found him on KSL. And he said, I will sell you I'm interested in buying your cell phone. And I'm going to pay X number of dollars. Just meet me in this public place. So the father of the daughter who was selling the cell phone on KSL said, you're not going alone. Very smart dad. And he went with her. Well, what they weren't expecting is when they pulled up and rolled down the window, Book pulled out a gun and pointed it at the father and at the daughter and said, give me everything you have. And they complied, and Book ran away. The charges were brought against Book at that time, and he was released from jail almost immediately. And while he was out, of jail. And while that case was pending, there were some plea deals and negotiations that went on. And then about a month prior to him, I think he ended up getting probation and parole on that case, and not spending too much time in jail. Either that or he was on probation and parole for a prior case. Regardless, he was out on parole when he was pulled over in a car that was a stolen vehicle, and he ran from the police, and in his pocket was a piece of ammunition. And he would have been a felon or a restricted person in possession of some type of firearm, some type of weapon. But there was some debate as to whether or not they could pin the weapon on him. Regardless, he was in violation of parole anyway. And there should have been a parole hearing at that time. He should have been arrested, and he wasn't. And there was no parole hearing. And a month later, he shot Aaron Lowe. So it's not a counterfactual to say that that murder was entirely preventable. And there's a reason why Aaron Lowe's family came out on the news and expressed their displeasure and their frustration with the fact that this guy wasn't held accountable long before Aaron Lowe's death.
Wow. And I'm interested for those of us who are less familiar with some of the intricacies of the decision to whether to charge or not, or to prosecute certain crimes. Is it, in incompetence or lack of resources, or what's going on in the DA's office that's leading to, from what I've heard, you talk a lot of people that are committing these crimes and getting prosecuted, which it seems to be, that's what the DA's office is there for. So what is leading to this lapse in fulfilling of duty on behalf of the Salt Lake County and the people that live here?
So it's twofold. One is bad policy. So within the screening policies, screening is what an attorney goes through once a case is referred to them. So city attorneys and police obviously can't charge, but city attorneys in particular cannot charge felonies. And so they refer a case to the DA's office for their review. And the screening is essentially a review. So they will look over the case, look over the files, look over everything they have, and they will determine whether or not this rises to the level of probable cause in order to charge them with a particular crime. Okay. Is it more likely than not that a crime was committed? Is it reasonable to assume at this point in time, given all the evidence that there was a crime committed, can I charge this individual? So if you can, you do. That's generally the standard. But if you can't, what you would do is you would write what's called a declination letter, send it back to the city attorney or back to the detective and say, hey, I need more evidence, right? Either the case is lacking evidence or, there's not really a legal cause of action here. So what they may have done to you may have been abhorrent and awful, but it didn't rise to the level of criminal. And so you would usually write that down in a letter called a declination letter, and you would send it back. And recently, the DA has been sending back these declination letters that say, in the interest of justice, the state is declining further charges. That's it. No further explanation. Don't ask me what that means. I have no idea. That's a question for my opponent. But there's a lot of reasons to decline a case. One reason not to decline a case, though, is in the interest of justice. And this is where it comes down to the screening methods and policies. In his own policies that is stated on the website, it says a prosecutor should not bring charges or maintain charges against a defendant they believe is innocent, regardless of the evidence presented. That's still up on the website. You can still go and read that. Wow. And I'm not quoting this backwards. I'm not making this up. This is verbatim what it says in the policy. And that's insane to me. It's like, it's so antithetical to what a prosecutor should be doing. The prosecutor should look at the evidence, look at the law, and if there's enough to move forward on a charge, you move forward with the appropriate charge. And if there's enough, through investigation to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this person did commit a crime, then you move it to trial. If you're not confident that you can move it to trial, okay, maybe that's where plea bargaining and a plea negotiation may work out, right? Because there's other charges that you can move to trial and show beyond a reasonable doubt, but you're not entirely sure that it's worth it at that point. And maybe the defendant will plea out on the lesser charges. So you say, hey, I'll drop the greater charge. So that does and can occur. But one thing that does happen in that process is sometimes defendants are pressured into accepting a plea deal because the prosecuting attorney, and I'm not saying this is always the case, but it does occur, the prosecuting attorney doesn't have litigation experience. So they don't actually know which cases can succeed at trial, which charges will win at trial. So they push and pressure the defendant into accepting a plea deal instead of just dropping the charges because they know they can't meet that standard, or they just don't know that they can't meet that standard. So this is where it's twofold, right? One is policy, the policy of saying, hey, we're not going to, and this I'll talk about in my platform, but one policy would be, which is what I'm proposing, is no plea deals for repeat violent offenders. So here I have this guy, he beat his wife before, we gave him a plea deal. He's beating his wife again. No more plea deals. I'm taking this to trial, right? And then the question is, okay, can I take it to trial? And that's where training comes in and resources comes into the DA's office. Right now, he's operating at a 35% loss of DAs and staff. They just don't want to work for him. I've heard the term toxic. I've heard the term vindictive. I've heard all kinds of things about the DA's office. I was actually warned not to go work at the DA's office because of the type of environment it had and because there was no room for growth within that career. And so I chose to take, that prosecutor's word for it, and I took a different path with my career. But unfortunately, it's everything that Nathan Evershed was saying, my predecessor who ran against Sim Gill, everything he was saying years ago in 2018 has only amplified since then. And we're seeing the fruits of that, right? 180 declination letters on second-degree felonies within a 2-month period, all saying the same thing, copy and paste. In the interest of justice, the state's not filing charges. In the interest of justice, the state's not maintaining charges. You see, people leaving in droves. I have a friend who joined the DA's office in January of this year, or maybe March of this year. I think it was March. He joined in March and he's already put in his resignation letter and he said, I'm sorry, I can't wait for you. It's that bad. And what it is these attorneys, it's mismanagement of funds on top of bad management, period, right? There's this lack of leadership, lack of motivation, if you don't have the drive within yourself to do what's right, it's very hard to impress that upon the people who you work with, right? And I think that is what is occurring in the DA's office right now. There's a lack of appreciation for the work that people are doing, and there's a lack of drive and motivation to really hold people accountable. And you have to hold yourself accountable before you can go holding anyone else accountable. And my opponent has failed to do that as well. So that all being said, there's also a lack of or a mismanagement of resources. For example, the county council gave to Sim Gill, I think last year, I think they gave him $1.3 or $1.4 million worth of ARPA money so that he could go and hire and retain his staff, because he said, I don't have enough money to hire. I can't pay them enough. I need to pay them more. Okay, fine. We'll give you $1.3 or $1.4 million. Take it, go get what you need, right? He came back to the council about 2 months ago and said, actually, I have about $700,000 worth of underspend, and I would like to use that instead of putting it into the personnel budget. I would like to reappropriate that money towards buying laptop computers and cars and vans for my investigators. And we said, okay, well, are all of your laptops dead? Is that what's happening? No, they're just going out of warranty and it's good practice. Okay, well, that's 200,000 right there. If we add up all the laptops, what about the cars? So we start adding up all the money. And as we kept asking questions, suddenly that item was pulled from discussion and the request disappeared. So there's a lack of transparency going on between the DA's office and the council, which makes the council skittish. They're the ones who are writing the checks. And then if he doesn't have the resources, that's who he goes to. And so you're either mismanaging funds, mismanaging personnel, or you have no idea what you're doing and you're just collecting a paycheck, which is really the purest form of corruption, right? You sit on your butt, you do nothing, and you get paid through taxpayer dollars. And that's essentially what's been happening in that office for the past 4 years. And people can sit there and say, oh no, Danielle, people are working hard. And that's true. The prosecutors on the ground level, they're working so hard. And they're doing a job that I do not envy. And I have the utmost respect for those prosecutors, for those attorneys. I have zero respect for my opponent because it shouldn't take, more than 60 days after completing your investigation to make a charging decision on a gun-related incident or a shooting-related incident with the police. I mean, that's obvious to me. But it took him 4 years to do that, 3 expert witnesses, and 1 grand jury trial. 1 grand jury to finally come to a decision on whether or not he was going to charge an officer. So that's the situation with the DA's office right now. And what I'm asking is, I'm saying, look, if I get in there, I have new energy, I have new vision, I have a platform that I want to, implement in the DA's office that I think will right the ship and get us, turned back around. It's going to motivate attorneys because 1, attorneys feel 2 forms of motivation. 1 is the good feelings that you get when you put a bad guy away. And then 2, you get a great feeling when you're able to maneuver your career and start to grow in your career and develop. And so what I would first like to do is I would like to get my attorneys trained. So I want to bring in consultants to come in and work with my attorneys hand in hand on trial litigation. So we're not talking about just plea deal negotiations like the $3 million I think that Sim Gill spent on plea deal negotiation training, but actual litigation training, because that's why attorneys go there. They go there to earn their stripes so they're more valuable in the private sector. I don't blame them. If they want to be with the office for 10 years, 15 years, heck, if they want to be with the office for 5 years or 4 years, that pays off that initial 2 years, and their work and service is so invaluable during that time that I'll take them for any time within that period. But they have to feel a sense of mentorship. They have to feel a sense of growth, and there needs to be opportunities for growth and mentorship. And that's going to come down to the way that the office is structured, which I also plan on making some changes there and making sure that the personnel, get a raise. Every staff member should have a raise. I mean, there is no excuse. There's more than enough funds. Give them their raise, pay a little bit more to our prosecutors, retain the staff, get them trained up, get quality litigators on that team. So that way these cases are going through and moving through the system and the prosecutors feel like more than just paper pushers.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I'm hearing you talk about some of the results of this mismanagement, these declination letters that are so vague, and I'm just trying to take the perspective of those who are the victims of these crimes to be told that in the interest of justice, this is not going to be prosecuted. That must just be really difficult. You come and you report the crime, you have this faith in the justice system, the criminal justice system, to make things right, and to get that must be really heartbreaking.
I can't even imagine, to be honest. And I've met with some of these victims. I've met with some of the survivors, and they've broken down, in the parking lot with me and told me their story, and it's devastating. And that's why, as part of my platform, I want to give a voice back to victims. I want to make sure that they're being represented, that they're a part of the system, that they understand that their voice is valuable, they have a seat at the table. And I mean, it's insane to me right now that victims are being told not to come to preliminary hearings, that they're being told not to assert their rights. I helped a victim assert her rights just last week. She called me and said that the prosecutor didn't want her coming to a preliminary hearing. And she was very nervous about going, and she asked me to come with her. I said, absolutely, I'll come with you. Well, after she read her victim statement to the judge and asked the judge to hold this man until trial, the judge set bail at $1 million. So it was valuable for her to go. Prelims were completely waived. And I have heard horror stories of victims who've been told, don't come to the preliminary hearing. It's not necessary for you to be there. And then the prosecutor goes and negotiates a plea deal. And these plea deals are not insubstantial. We're talking about 0 jail time for a murderer. That just happened this week.
Wow.
A man was sentenced to 0 jail time, 4 years probation for shooting his girlfriend last year because the DA amended the charges. They went ahead and dismissed all of the first-degree felonies, brought it down to second-degree manslaughter. And what's particularly egregious about it is that he beat his grandmother in California prior to this incident, and he killed his grandmother in California. So it's just one more murderer walking around amongst us and zero accountability. I can't imagine how the daughter of that woman must feel. It has to be absolutely terrifying, to be frank.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I say, I think people do have a lot of faith that they put in our criminal justice system. So I think it's really valuable to have people in public service that are willing to carry that out. And that's why it's so great that you're willing to step up and run for this office. I want to approach a topic that you have as part of your platform, which is about reforging relationships with law enforcement. Can you tell me what might have caused those relationships to deteriorate over time, and how you would actually go about, improving them as the county DA?
So our current DA has made it very clear that he sees the relationship between the police and the prosecutors as an adversarial relationship. Prior to him being elected, they used to have a very cordial relationship, very symbiotic relationship, which is what you need in order to carry out justice. The reason it's so important, and I'll explain this here very quickly, I may have the power of the court to subpoena someone. I may have the power of the court to subpoena documents and records, and I may be able to secure a protective order for a victim, or I may be able to work out all kinds of different things, okay? Prosecutors have immense power. But one thing I can't do is show up and arrest somebody, right? I can't show up and enforce a protective order. I can't go gather evidence. I can't go do those things. I rely on the police to do those things. And so when you have a positive relationship with the police, two things happen. One, the prosecutors have someone to rely on. They know the detectives personally. They can call them. They can say, hey, I need more evidence. If you want me to charge this guy, I'm lacking this and this and this, right? They can have that relationship there. They can call them and say, hey, we're having trial on this date, or we have a hearing on this date. Are you available on that date to come and be a witness? Because the vast majority of witnesses are your police officers. They're the ones who are there. They're the ones who witnessed what occurred. And they need to be able to testify about what they saw, what they observed, what they were told, all of those fact-finding missions that I cannot do as a prosecutor. And you don't want me to do, right? You don't want some creepy prosecutor sitting outside your window and deciding that they know the law and are going to enforce the law. And that leads us to the second part. The second benefit is that the police get to learn the law. They get to work hand in hand with prosecutors. And especially if prosecutors go out on ride-alongs with the police, the prosecutors can inform the police, hey, this actually isn't harassment. This thing that this person is saying, that's not harassment. I know that you just said that to that guy, but I wouldn't recommend arresting him, or, hey, I saw you approach it this way. Can you explain to me why you did that? And may I make a recommendation for the future, so that it's easier for you to get the information I need, the facts that I need to pursue this case, and also so that we're following policy and procedure correctly. Because one mistake, one fatal mistake, and you've done what is called poisoning the well. It's very hard for me to go and get more evidence if, it's a fruit of the poison tree. If there's, some misconduct, if things weren't documented correctly, if there's some question about the veracity of a police officer's testimony, right? It's so invaluable and useful to have those relationships there. And finally, and this is the third thing which just came to mind, is when you have those relationships, it develops trust between the two offices. And when you have that trust, the police are more prone to say, hey, Danny or Danielle, I have this case. I know this guy, this police officer I work with, he's a real jerk. And he did some stuff that I think is really shady. Will you take a look at it? Or to have the police union come to me and say, yeah, we're not protecting this guy, have at him. This is pretty clearly a violation of our policies and standards. And we don't want that to reflect on the rest of us. But if you don't have that relationship, what it causes is a lack of trust. And without trust, people do not talk to each other. We cannot resolve issues. We cannot resolve things before they escalate, right? What are small policy, violations can very quickly become, a disregard for the policy and then a disregard for the law. And people get wrapped up in that all the time, whether it be, attorneys or law enforcement or doctors or anyone else. It starts with these little law-breaking habits that build over time because you just get used to it and no one ever told you no before. Police are really good about policing themselves, but they miss things. And it's good to have strength and to know that, if I call the DA, I'm not going to be investigated. I'm not going to be told I'm the wrong one just for reporting what I see as a violation or a crime, right? So there's got to be an element of trust and cohesion and symbiosis between our two departments. And when it comes to holding police accountable, I've promised 60 days after completing my investigation, I will come to a charging decision. I will let you know if a shooting was justified, unjustified. And not just the officer, but let the public know. I have no problem discussing these, my charging decisions with the public. If I cannot clearly articulate why I've made a legal decision, then I don't have the ability to be an attorney, right? Like I shouldn't even be an attorney. I'm not a capable individual. And I think that's what we're seeing currently, and it needs to change.
Yeah, it sounds like those values of the clarity and accountability are just really valuable for somebody in this position.
Very much so.
I'm glad you've made that a real cornerstone of your campaign. Just as we get to the end of our time here, I want to have you just give a closing statement and maybe talk a little bit about how folks can learn more about you and find out how to support your campaign.
Wonderful. So I would recommend everybody go to my website, www.da4da.com. And I'll just leave it right here. You guys can see it.
Right.
The website is valuable. It outlines all of my policies. It outlines what I hope to do, my platform, and what my focus is. I'm not pretending to be the candidate with all the answers, right? But I am promising to be a very competent attorney who's going to be very forthright and honest with people. And I don't see any shame in taking criticisms, fair criticisms, unlike my opponent, who really doesn't take criticism well, who will charge you for desecrating his prosecutorial palace. For those who don't know, I think it was 2020, wasn't it? It was 2020 where a bunch of protesters were upset with the charging decision of the DA's office, and they came and painted his entire building red and put posters on it, maybe broke some windows. And he decided he was going to charge each one of the protesters, even though he was the victim in the case. So there was a clear conflict of interest there that any attorney should have recognized. So he goes ahead and charges each one, and then he enhances their charges with gang enhancements so that the person who bought paint would spend the rest of their life in jail. Okay.
Wow.
That's the type of vindictiveness that needs to stop. That's the lack of transparency that has to stop. And I think, if anything, those protests were a reaction to his lack of transparency. If people understand your reasoning or your logic, they may disagree with you, but they're not going to come burn down your building. People come and burn down buildings when they feel like there wasn't a frank discussion, when they feel like you're hiding something from them. That's the reality. And so we can do better about that. That's what I hope to do. I hope to bring honesty, transparency, and real accountability back to that office. I want people to respect the justice system. I want people to trust that when they report a crime, that it will be carried through, that they will see justice, that that person will be held accountable. What I don't want to see is what's happening right now. And if we continue down this path, I don't know. I'm terrified to think of what Salt Lake County will look like in 4 years.
Well, thank you for all you're doing and for the citizens of Salt Lake County and for being here tonight with us. I would encourage everyone.
Joel, can I make one more statement here?
Absolutely.
Really quickly? Because I know this is being recorded, and I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of Democrats who are going to come and look at this. And what my recommendation to them is, please look at this. Please don't hesitate to contact me. Out of all the races, this is by far the most nonpartisan. I'm just here to do a good job. That's it. I'm not here to, push my political agenda. As a matter of fact, I want to get politics out of prosecution. I want everyone to be treated fairly and equally. So, please investigate me. Please look at all my things, take it in good faith, and hold me accountable. If I do something you don't like, my door is open. Please come talk to me.
Great. Well, thanks, Danielle. Thanks for being here. And for everyone tuning in, thanks for being with us tonight. We want to encourage you to look at all of the candidates' materials. We posted each of their information in the comments, so you can go check that out and find ways to learn more about them and support them if you believe in their vision for the county. And we would like to encourage you to join us next Thursday night for another Thursday night town hall. And until then, have a good evening.
Thank you, Joel.
Okay.